Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining this GlobeDocs discussion on the film On Board. And I'm so happy that our guest is the film's director, Deborah Riley Draper. And Deborah, thank you so much for joining us for a conversation about your film, On Board.
Thank you so
My name's Lauren King, and Deborah is here. Thank you for joining us, Deborah.
My pleasure. I'm excited to be here, excited to talk about the film. Let's jump in.
Let's jump in. So let's just find it to the uninitiated. They might think women serving on corporate boards not the most exciting topic necessarily. Somehow you managed to make it quite entertaining and inspiring. What was inspiring about this topic for you? Why did you want to tackle this subject?
Well, it's really interesting. There were a group of us. We were at a spa, and Merline Saintil had created this organization, Black Women on Boards. And as we were talking about Black women on boards, we were trying to figure out who was the first Black woman on a board. And none of us
Hmm.
knew.
Hmm.
And then the Google search failed us in that moment. And so we realized that this was really an interesting trajectory. And the woman was Patricia Roberts Harris, this phenomenal lawyer and dean of a law school. She'd been the third in line to be president of the United States in the Carter administration. So she was the first Black woman to sit on an American corporate board some 50 years ago, just 50 years ago, and that board was IBM. And I was fascinated by that. And I was fascinated by the journey of the current women who were being groomed to become a part of boards. And I realized that, wow, our everyday lives are impacted, affected, and changed by the people who sit on the boards of American companies. What we eat, what we wear, the kind of car we drive, they make all these decisions that not only affect their employees, but the entire ecosystem. And I thought, what power? And I thought of all the wonderful movies where I had seen boardrooms and where I didn't see a lot of women in those rooms. So that's how the idea of telling the story in an entertaining way um, came about. Like, this is an interesting way that we've been raised through media to think of who sits at the boardroom, who sits at the table, who gets a chair, right? And I love that the organization was turning that on its head and changing the narrative as to who is a part of this very once, very elite room and elite table.
So that's so interesting that not knowing who Patricia Roberts Harris was sort of the inspiration because she's kind of the guiding light of the film. Because I was watching it and I had the same reaction, like, how did I not know who this woman was? Why is this new information to me? And I'm sure to many of our viewers probably was an education as well. So that would you say that was sort of the impetus to
The
bring
film
her to knowledge of people?
Well, yes, that knowledge is power, right? So understanding that there was a woman who created a pathway for generations of women to follow if they knew that she had done it, right? So this information was critical for the enlightenment and the inspiration of other women. She forged a path that had already been made. So all we have to do is walk down that pathway if we know the pathway's made. It was to inspire, right? But it was also to change how we think about power and how we think about who has access to it and who should have access to it. And also to get us all to think about companies and companies differently and what we should expect from the companies and expect from the people who sit on the boards. We get to have expectations of those companies because they're a part of our communities. They're the corporate citizens within our communities. So we get to look at them critically. We get
Mhm.
to look at them as we would look at our neighbors, and we have expectations of how we want our neighbors to behave. And the people who sit on those boardrooms help make the decisions around how our corporate friends and our corporate neighbors behave, how they treat the environment, how they treat the employees, how they treat the products. That's important because that's important to our livelihood. That's important to our well-being.
Mhm. So, Deborah, tell me a little bit about the process. So now you've got the idea and you want to get this information out there. I assume some of the women may have been at this spa with you, maybe not. But how did you go about assembling this cast of interviewees who talk about their experiences? How did you get them to participate?
Well, it's really interesting because Shannon Nash and Merline Saintil are the executive producers, and they are two women who sit on boards.
Yeah,
And Black Women on Boards was founded by Merline Saintil and Robin Washington. So they knew these women. These were their colleagues. These were their friends. These were people who aspired to be on boards or people that they had helped get on board. So we were able to create, based on the outline of the story that I wanted to tell, they were able to help me find the right cast members to help tell this story, who were passionate, who had interesting stories and interesting backgrounds and interesting journeys, but all from this same idea of this is something that I didn't know I could do.
yeah.
Now that I'm aware of it, I want to put myself right in that spot.
Hmm, hmm.
And
Yeah,
and research
I-
was critical. I'm sorry. Research for me is critical.
yeah,
So in every documentary, I start with research. I start with understanding the first American company. Like in my research, I found out it was the Shirley Plantation was the first corporation in America, right? So we have an interesting corporate history in
yeah.
this country. And that was very informative for me to understand how the structure of companies in America existed and who created the structure and who it included and who it didn't. So that's always for me the first place to start getting a good, strong foundational education around the subject matter and the potential subjects within that
Yeah.
space. So that's how it starts.
Yeah, yeah. And the women and men you spoke with seemed very enthusiastic about talking about this because it's probably not something they've I mean, I can't recall any other film about it. It just doesn't seem like the kind of thing that they've been out there talking about. Oh, let me tell you what it's like to be on a board and why I think it's important. So it seemed like they were enthused and loved being asked about it.
Well, yes, that is the point, Lauren. No one's been talking about it. This is something that has existed in our culture, and as I said before, impacts us, and we don't know anything about it.
Yeah,
It's almost a secret society or a secret club that
yeah,
only the people who are part of it actually have a conversation about it, and only with each other.
yeah.
So I wanted to democratize that information so that we can all understand what really happens.
Yeah.
The decisions to hire and fire CEOs, all of these major important decisions happen. Like we believe we understand the boardroom, we understand the concept of it because we all work, but the idea of how these people get on boards, what happens when they're in the boardroom, what are the expectations of these people, and why in the history of our country did it take so long for women who are such strong consumers and direct so many consumer dollars to be a part of that decision making.
Mhm, mhm. Well, you have so much great information in there, Deborah, that things have changed and are changing. Of course, I wonder if there's been any change in the current moment we're in, where there does seem to be attacks on diversity. Um, I, I don't know if I don't know if you can answer that now because it does seem like there was a nice moment that you chronicle in the film post COVID, post Black Lives Matter, and I don't know if there's been any backlash or if you know that if that's happening.
Right now, I think we have to all pay attention to the backlash,
Mhm,
because a backlash on one group affects all groups. So if there's a backlash on women or a backlash on Black women or Black people, being able to participate in conversations that impact us all, then we're all in trouble. So the attacks on DEI, uh,
mhm,
I think we really need to take a beat and examine what that is really about.
Yeah.
Because if you have a boardroom filled with 12 qualified people,
Mm-hmm.
some incredibly overqualified, some of whom are people of color, some of whom are women, do you not want those smart people sitting at your boards?
Mm-hmm.
Do you not want that perspective helping guide you to success, greater success? Because all of the research shows that diverse boards, diverse companies, diverse employee workforces turn greater profits,
Mm-hmm.
create better work environments. So, but if you don't want greater profits or greater work environments or diverse perspectives or the wonderful environments where you have all of these different ideas coming creating brilliant ideas. If you don't want that, then sure, do away with it. And let's see where it takes us.
Yeah, the information you showed, and several people mentioned the diversity outperforms the diverse teams outperform non-diverse teams. So it does seem a no-brainer that this would be. But you know, in the climate we're in, there's a lot of things that don't make sense. A lot of illogic that seems to be going in it. But are you in touch with a lot of the people that you were
Absolutely.
profiling in the film? Yeah,
Absolutely. And they're all doing well and
mm,
fine. And they still have their
yeah,
board seats.
yeah.
And I'm very proud of them for the work that they're doing to ensure that remains a constant, and not only a constant, but grows
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm,
increases. Um,
mm-hmm.
you know, I'm gonna ask you a question, Lauren. Would you enjoy eating the same apple every day for the rest of your life?
Definitely not.
Okay. Would you want some diversity in your diet?
Absolutely.
Different,
I
something that tastes a
Yeah,
little different?
yeah, yeah. That's what makes it interesting and fun and healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Expanding our perspectives. And
Mhm,
that's why I love making film, because
mhm,
sometimes we don't think about certain things. And then, when we see a film or we read a book or we're exposed to journalism or an article or an opinion piece even, whether we agree or disagree, it does create a moment where we pause and think about it.
mhm.
And we
Yeah,
take in that perspective, or we take in this new information and we analyze it and we apply some critical thinking to it and we
yeah.
unpack it. And sometimes that may even show us our own biases.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Tell me, I mean, I just wanna make I didn't say this at the top of our conversation, but if, any participants have questions for Deborah, please put a question in the chat, and after I ask a few more questions of mine, I'll open it up and we'll get some more of the, audience questions for you. But I wondered about that great moment in the film, Deborah, where the 45, Black women on boards, members are standing there. It's a very powerful moment. Were you there
I
for
was
that?
in the audience,
You
and
were in the
actually,
audience.
our cameras, that footage we shot,
You
that's
shot
footage
it.
I
Yeah.
shot. But in shooting that footage, I still had a tear in my eye, because it was so powerful and it was so moving, and it said, "Wow, progress," right?
Mhm,
And
mhm,
and it's just not about just them standing there, but that means other people realized that this was important and helped facilitate that moment. And as you saw in the film, there were people of all races, creeds, or colors who believed that that moment should occur and that that
mhm,
moment should happen and that they were proud to be a part of that moment, you know? And I think what that says is there's great joy when we cheer other people on too. We don't always just have to cheer ourselves on, but
mhm,
cheer other people.
mhm, mhm.
There's joy in that too.
It was a great moment, and I think it was, Merline Saintil. Is that how she says her name? She's the
And
one that called this a sisterhood.
yeah,
That she and her colleague gathered people together in what she called a sisterhood. There was a constant message in there, and I wondered how you felt about that in your profession and business, about mentorship, about being a role model, about being an influence for future generations. And I just wondered how that spoke to you as an artist and as a woman with your own business. Is that something you related to as well?
every day we have to be accountable.
Hmm.
We have to be accountable to the future, because I don't want my future self to be like, gosh, you really screwed that up and you messed that up for everybody coming behind you. You know, I that's the accountability and the responsibility we have as people operating and taking up space. If you're going to be a part of this world, you have to be accountable to the other people who inhabit the world. You're not here by yourself. You're not here
Hmm.
alone. There's not anything that you can actually accomplish as a single person without anyone else. And I think, making a film, you can't make a film by yourself. I mean, you can try, of course, you can try to do all of the roles, right? But it's so much more rewarding when you are making something with someone else, even as simple as a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right? Lauren, if you put the peanut butter on, I'll put the jelly on. We smash it together, we cut it in half, and we can sit there and enjoy our sandwich together, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
a good way to
Or
look
you
at
can
it.
make it by yourself.
Yeah. 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 Lots of influences, ideas, different ways of doing things.
Yeah, I may choose to get almond butter this time, instead of peanut butter. And you may say, I've never had it that way. And
Mhm.
then you may take a bite of it and wow, you're like, I like it that way too.
I was very struck by, I mean, so many of these women, not so, not many, all of them are so accomplished, so interesting. It made me, I love that you included so much about their background. And it's not, there, many of them come from very modest backgrounds. They're not, coming from a lot of wealth or privilege, um, many of them. And I wondered how important that was to you as in terms of a storyteller, that you wanted to include that background information and pictures of them as kids and pictures of their families, so that we see, like, it demystifies this idea that you have to somehow be, I don't know, just a corporate, that requires a certain kind of identity or a certain kind of background, and that's dispelled right away.
That's exactly the point, Lauren, because we are all capable. And
Mhm,
we are all ready to make the important decisions to make our world better when we go to college and we go to graduate school and we put in the work and we work hard and we have something to bring to the table. That you
mhm,
shouldn't have to look a certain way. You
mhm,
shouldn't have to grow up in a specific city or have
yeah,
parents who did a specific thing. What fun is that? It is important that we understand that diversity and inclusion doesn't mean someone is less than or not capable. It means they've had a different lived experience.
mhm,
And when we are not comfortable with other people who are different, that is not about the other person. That's about you. You're not comfortable. That's you,
yeah,
the
yeah.
person.
Yeah, I mean, I love that there's 2, Merline and Asana. I mean, they were born elsewhere, Haiti and Nigeria, right? I mean, I just love that there's these stories. I mean, they're just the embodiment of diversity, and again, what that brings to that room where you said it, the clips you showed at the beginning, where it all looks one way, and here we've got so much more that they bring to it.
And I think people have to put their questions in the Q&A. I think someone said the chat was disabled.
Oh, let me see if there's one here. Okay, well, there is a question in it. I don't There is a question, so we'll go to that, and I have so much I'd love to talk, but I do want to get people in here. Okay, this is an anonymous attendee, but they would like to know, Deborah, do you think the new DEI executive orders will affect Black women on boards, given the prohibition on promoting diversity? I know you've answered that somewhat, but do you want to elaborate on what
You know,
you
I
what
I,
you would
th-
say?
I think that's going to be a really important question for the American boards. You
Mhm,
know, I guess it's going to depend on whether the boards will be able to think for themselves and think for the ecosystems that they represent. Um, and I don't know where that is going to land. I wish I could confidently say that this would not affect the progress that's been made, but I don't know if I can confidently say that.
Mhm. Now that you've made the film, do people come up and ask you, or the system you're plugged into, having met all these great women, do they want to know, how do I get on a board? How do I get this information?
Absolutely. Absolutely. People are now inspired that this is something that they can do and something that they can be a part of. And there's so many training programs out there at universities, at colleges, at Black women on boards, at their website that can literally train you about corporate governance. Before I did this film, I didn't even know I could be trained in corporate governance. I didn't know it was a thing, but it is a thing. And
Yeah.
it's a thing that we all can become familiar with and that we all can be a part of. You may not get a seat on a publicly traded company, but you could be on the board of the nonprofit in your town. You could
Mhm.
be on the board, a school board. You can contribute to the hundreds of thousands of boards in your community that need smart people to help with corporate governance, to help them become better serving the community or serving the arts or serving sports or whatever your interests are. There's an organization that can use your smarts on their board.
Mhm. Okay, and that in that same thread, Nancy Dorman, she writes, I am white and born with privilege, not wealth. I am 72 years old and disabled. What can I do to support Black women on boards?
What a wonderful question. And you by typing that question, you're already being supportive and you're already involved in allyship. I think that's great by watching the film, but you can go to the website and there's so many ways that they've outlined on that website that you can support. You can even take the governance class yourself to become even more aware of what these roles are. But I think sharing the film with other people is the first way. Talking about what you've seen in the film is the second way. Going to the website, signing up for the newsletter so you can read what the organization is doing, when they're coming to your town, how you can participate in some of the initiatives. I think those are all great ways. But definitely go onto that website and sign up for the newsletter so you can be involved in what they're involved in. And I want to be clear, not everyone who's involved in Black women on boards is Black. So there are people who believe in that mission and they want to support, like this wonderful woman, Nancy. Thank you for that question, Nancy. I appreciate it.
And when you say the website, Deborah, it's onboard.com, or is it your
Black women on boards.
Black women on boards? Okay, because the film has a website as well,
Yeah.
but
And if
Black
you go
women
to
on
the
board.
film's website, it's going to redirect you to the organization as well.
So when you were making the film, Deborah, was there any bit of information or interviewee that you spoke with that surprised you and sort of changed the direction a little, or underscored maybe a little bit more of what you were going to do? Like, because they had so much passion and so much to say. I wonder how that affected where you were coming from as the filmmaker.
Well, I will tell you, one of the most inspiring interviews was with Fawn Weaver, who built her own company on which she sits on her own board,
Mhm.
Uncle Nearest, the whiskey company,
Yeah, yeah.
and that was a reminder that we don't have to be a part of the traditional companies. We can build our own companies as women. We can, and she has $1 billion company and create opportunities for other women to sit on boards. So I think it's really important to dream. And I think that's what I want people to get out of watching this film. Dream big, dream bold, be courageous in your thought, and invite other people in, all sorts of interesting people, and form these committees and coalitions in your town to ensure that all the boards that you see, even locally, um, are the best boards that they can be, with the best, smartest, most interesting people. I think that is really important. And for people who want to watch the film that haven't, they can go to onboardthefilm.com,
Mhm.
thefilm.com to learn about the film. And that will also take them to the organization Black Women on Boards as well. They can do both.
We do have a question from Susan Berry. She wanted to know where she could find the film to share. Now, you just said where she could find the film. Is that a way? I mean, can people just watch it?
They can go to if they go to the film's website, they'll tell them how to watch it, but it's on Vimeo and they can
Okay.
watch it on Vimeo. They can even have a Vimeo watch party with their friends.
Okay.
It's available. So
Yeah.
go to Vimeo and watch the film. It's Women's History Month. This is a great opportunity to learn about some great women who've done some very historic things, and not just for Women's History Month, just in general. Yeah.
Okay, another question. Another anonymous attendee, but this is a little long, but let me read it. Being on corporate boards usually requires making large financial donations. Is this an obstacle to people being appointed, or are the most significant obstacles the companies and boards themselves? Also, as a woman on a nonprofit board, I find it a difficult challenge to challenge board and company practices without being perceived as difficult. Do you or your Black Women on Boards members have thoughts on this?
Well, to be on a publicly traded board, you actually don't have to make a considerable financial contribution. That's typically on nonprofit boards where they want the board members to help raise money. That's different than on a publicly traded corporate board. That is not the requirement there. The requirement there is to help steward the company. So I think as a member of boards, and that's what I mean about being a part of the smaller boards, right? The boards in your local cities, the boards in your communities, because those nonprofit boards typically do need the board members to fundraise, and that is typically a requirement. And that's something that you can change, and that's something that you can say, let's have a couple of ways that people can be a part of this board so that the tax of the financial tax opens up and is removed, so smart people who may not be able to bring $50,000 to a nonprofit can actually be a part of that board and get that board training. So I also would suggest that you go to Black Women on Boards. They have a lot of training programs that impact both nonprofits, which operate completely differently. Our film is really about the publicly traded corporate boards, which don't
Yeah,
have
but
requirement. Mhm.
yes, corporate boards, the many Fortune 500 companies,
Exactly. Do not have that
they
requirement.
don't have that requirement. Now,
Yep.
Deb, let's talk a little bit about your own company, because you are yourself an entrepreneur. Is the Coffee
Pictures.
Bluff Pictures is yours. And I
Yes.
know you've made many films, which I do want to ask you about a couple, but just talk a little bit about it as a company and your particular journey as both a filmmaker and as a business owner.
Yes, my company is called Coffee Bluff Pictures. It was established in 2010. Coffee Bluff is a river in Savannah that runs behind my grandmother's house, and actually the name of the road that she lives on. So the name is very personal to me and personal to my family. I started off in advertising. So I'm ex BBDO, ex Ogilvy, ex Colossus, which is a Boston-based company, as a matter of fact, ad agency. And the idea of storytelling and the idea of branding are a part of who I am as an advertising person. I always say I was a Draper in advertising before Don Draper was on Mad Men. Just for clarity, just so we can establish that out the gate. Um, and but what advertising teaches you, it teaches you about business. So I am running brands, I'm running accounts. So that ability was transferable to me establishing a production company. And it's a small production company. It's a woman-owned production company that's a small business. And I'm proud of that. And it's hard because, learning how to run a business that is yours is difficult. Um, all of the aspects of working inside of a company takes away the need for capital, right? You don't worry about profit as much when you're inside someone else's company, and you don't worry about the P&L as much. You do, but you're really, really honed in on that when you're the CEO and the founder. But I wanted to have that particular experience because I wanted agency over the stories that I told. I wanted to tell the stories that mattered to me, the stories that I thought were important, the stories that were valuable but were undervalued in the marketplace, the people, places, and things that were intentionally or unintentionally left out. Those were the stories I was drawn to. Those were the stories I wanted to tell. And having my own production company allows me to be able to make that decision. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, for me, that's everything.
Besides On Board, which is out there and people can access, you have another film coming out. On your website, it said that it's going to be coming up on Independent Lens in October. It ratified.
Yeah, Ratified is coming out in October. It's the story of the Equal Rights Amendment, the 100-year journey to have the ERA passed, which it is still not passed for the record. In the Constitution of the United States of America, women do not have equal rights. It's never been written in. And that amendment was first introduced by Alice Paul, over 100 years ago. And it has not been voted on yet by our Congress to be added to the Constitution. So that's what the film is about. It's about the courageous women who, for 100 years, want to ensure that this is enshrined in the Constitution. And I also have people can watch now this film. It's Women's History Month called Versailles '73, American Runway Revolution. It's my very first film. It's hysterical. It's about this fashion show that took place in Paris in 1973, where 5 American designers decided they wanted to compete against the lions of haute couture and save the Chateau de Versailles, which needed $60 million to be renovated. So they threw a fashion show to raise the money. Of course, they did not raise the money, but they had an amazing time, and it became the birth of American ready to wear in 1973. So it's a fun film. It's called Versailles '73, American Runway Revolution. People can see that on iTunes, or they can go to Vimeo and watch it, all the places. So the
Sounds
fun
like a lot
stuff,
of
that's
fun.
why I have a production company, because I can make films about things that I'm interested in, like fashion or sports
Yeah.
or, all those kinds of things.
That one sounded like you needed to do some archival research, but that seems like something you enjoy, because the archival material in On Board was really interesting as well. I mean,
It's
that
my
shot,
passion. Yeah.
that opening beginning with the compilation of the old films, and you have the door closing in that woman's face. I
Yeah.
mean, it was just a great
Audrey
moment.
Hepburn, that clip of Audrey Hepburn in that moment where she's walking through this boardroom thinking, wow, like I could be here maybe, you know, and it's a very powerful moment in that film, and Audrey plays it beautifully. And I think for me, I love looking at archival material, primary source material, because it's like applying an anthropological lens on things and being able to unpack what was going on in that moment and finding the truth in it and finding the vulnerability in it and being able to bring it to the present so we can examine our now against what was the then. Is it different? Is it the same? Is it improved? Is it worse? So it helps us. It brings context. And I was at I love a library. I love a special collections. I love archives. I love digging through boxes, and so being able to bring these stories from the past into the present, into the future are important. We can't lose sight of the past, and we can't try to change it and rewrite it. We have to confront it the way it was so we can understand the way things are.
Well, to that point, and one of the greatest clips in the film is that one of Patricia Harris, where she's being questioned at the Senate, which, again, as someone who had not heard of her, I'm sorry to say, that clip was a revelation, because it's so fascinating, her exchange with the senator, and it was just so great that you were able to put that in, because you cannot help but watch that through the prism of today, and it just does feel sometimes like, my God, have we, have we, where are we, because it felt so powerful but so relevant to today.
You had a visceral reaction, Lauren.
Yeah.
And that was the point. The point was to make you recognize several things. One, why don't I know this woman?
Hmm. Yeah.
Two, why does this 50-year-old clip feel like it happened this morning?
Yeah.
Why is this conversation still a conversation?
Yeah.
It- So
Yeah.
all of these questions were circling in your head as you watched it. That's the power
Yeah.
of film.
Yeah.
Make us think and to make us examine things for ourselves with your own unique lens and the true, raw, vulnerable emotion that you were experiencing in that moment by yourself as you watched it.
Yeah. 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 It truly was powerful, and it's such a revelation. Which I imagine is the excitement. Yeah, I can tell by the way you're reacting too, that this is what you love doing, is bringing this stuff out into the open. If it fascinates you and interests you, it will to somebody else as well. So
I hope so. I like to make things that I'm interested in. I That's why I enjoyed Versailles '73 because I got to go to Paris and look at pretty clothes and dig into the archives at Versailles and examine fashion, right? Because we just think of it maybe as clothes, but we don't think of it as the bazillion-dollar industry that
mm,
it is, and we don't think about what goes into the development of a brand, a fashion brand, and how these decisions are made. And I'm fascinated by decision making at that level. So,
mhm,
in addition to who doesn't love a good fashion show that goes
right.
south, that where the wheels come off. So
Yeah.
it's great. Mhm.
It is legendary. I didn't know anything about that until I watched that miniseries about Halston, and they talk about the Versailles show, like a big turning point that made his career, and so it's legendary. So it's great that you got to
Legendary. I was
dig
the
into that.
first person to bring that legendary fashion show to the big screen, and it was my first film and one of my proudest moments to be able to do that. And after that fact, there were some books and some miniseries that came out that also discussed that matter. So I love that so much to be able to share discoveries that inspire other people.
Well, we talked about Ratify. Do you have another film you're working on now?
Yes, I am currently working on Ramir Bearden, the legendary artist. He was an incredible contemporary artist that grew up during the Harlem Renaissance, but really came into his own in the '60s and the '70s. So Ramir Bearden is currently in development. I'm excited about it. I'm excited that he lived in New York, he lived in Paris, in Pittsburgh, and Charlotte, and all of this lived experience is collaged in his work. And when you look at the work, it's just an odyssey of his life, but of American history in general. So yes, people can go to the website and learn a little bit more about Ramir Bearden. The
And when do you think that film would be? When do you think?
2026.
Okay, great. And is that a feature length?
It's feature length film. Absolutely, yeah.
Now, is that an Emmy behind you?
Yes, it is.
Is that yours?
Of course it's mine. I'm not gonna sit someone else's Emmy on my shelf. That's
Well,
my
I just want to ask you about it. I'm glad to see it there. But maybe in the age of Zoom, people are like in closets and
no, that it's real.
it's real.
Yes,
So could you tell
it's
us about getting that
real.
that prestigious award?
That was for a show I did in 2013, where I was the producer of a show about Georgia and a celebration during the 4th of July in Georgia. I get you. That's so funny to me. You asked me, was it mine? Um,
Well, people, maybe this isn't the case anymore, but in when we first started doing Zoom, people used to, grab offices where they could, and so I didn't want to be presumptuous, but I'm very glad it's yours, and I'm not surprised it is.
no, no. This is my real office with my real things.
Well, since we've talked a little bit, Deborah, about the women on the boards, and talking about mentors, and it besides Patricia Harris, there were a couple of other names that were mentioned as influential to some of the women that you interviewed. And I just wondered if you had any particular influences in the film world or in the business world, or people who mentored you, or just how you were able to follow your dreams, like you said, to dream big. Obviously, being a filmmaker is a very big dream.
My first champion and my first mentor was my mom.
Mhm.
She was a public school teacher, and who loved libraries, and she taught me how to use microfiche, and
Wow.
that is something I still use to this very day. Who would have thought as a little kid that that particular skill, right, would be something that would serve me as a filmmaker, and it does. But I remember when I told my mom, and she passed away before I made my first film, that I was going to be a filmmaker, and she was like, "That's great news, and I can be in the film myself if you need me." I was like, "I don't know if I need you to be in my film, but but I appreciate the support." And along the way, I had just so many powerful women who've done amazing things. That I was like, wow, how did you do that? And I would ask them, and they said, I realized that I was enough, that everything I needed to do what I needed to do, I already had.
Mm,
And that's what I realized when I was working at BBDO and I wanted to make Versailles 73. I'd never made a film ever.
mhm.
Um, and when I came across the story of this fashion show, I remember calling Stephen Burrows, one of the American designers that had been in Paris, and I said, "I want to make this film." And he says, "Everyone's always talking about making a film about this fashion show, and no one ever does." And I was like, "Well, I'm going to do it. I'm a filmmaker from Atlanta." It was the first time I had said that out loud. I'd never
Wow.
said it before, but the minute I said it, I believed it, and I knew I was gonna make that film. I didn't have a crew, I didn't have a camera, I didn't have a plan, I didn't have a company that was incorporated at that moment, but I said, "I'm a filmmaker and I'm gonna make this film." And 2 years later, that film premiered at the Marché du Film at the Cannes Film Festival. Because I made that film, because I focused on it, because I realized that everything I needed was inside of me, which was really commitment and drive, resilience and perseverance, and I inherited those traits. And I also had seen those traits in the women who had been my bosses in advertising.
Wow.
And I kind of have to say,
Mhm.
the most important job I really had kind of taught me everything I know. I was like a party hostess in high school at Chuck E. Cheese, and at the party hostess at Chuck E. Cheese, that is an important job. Let me tell you, you have the birthday parties of children in your hands. You can ruin that 5-year-old's birthday party, and they can be traumatized for life. But you have to organize the party. You have to make sure it's on time within the budget of the parents. You have to have the characters all ready. Everything has to come out exactly when it's supposed to. You got to make sure the jumpy ball thing is ready. The skee ball machine isn't broken. The tickets are at the table. So it's all directing and organizing. That's what I did at 16, right?
Yeah,
I worked at Chuck E. Cheese,
yeah,
entertainment,
yeah.
branding, fun, storytelling.
That's a great endorsement, but you're right,
Yeah. And
that's
no
producing.
endorsement not intended. It's the
Yeah. No,
experience.
what you're
It's
talking about is producing something, producing an
producing something,
experience.
an
Yeah,
experience for people that
yeah.
they remember.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's great. Well, you've just been a delight to talk with, and I hope our viewers who stuck around appreciated the conversation and your enthusiasm for the project, and letting them know where they can find it, tell their friends about it, and finding out more about what you're going to be doing. So,
Great.
um,
I mean, people can follow me on LinkedIn, Deborah Riley Draper, and they can find out, I love a community, and
mm,
I welcome people to reach out and ask questions, because it's important to share, and it's important to have community, and important to have conversations, and to people who may not have the same experience as me. and people that I may not have the same experience as inspire me and maybe even be a character in a film, or you never know. The world is so beautiful and so interesting. And then we have conversations about it. We learn such great stuff. And that's really how almost every film I've ever had has come to life, because I had a conversation with someone and I was like, whoa, that's interesting. And then off I go. you know?
Well, that message is clear in On Board. It is all about relationships. I mean, I love the section where they talk about let's reach out, let's get other women that, and it was all about networking uh, reaching out and lifting up others. I mean, there's several quotes about, opening the door, and not having it just be for your benefit, but for others too, and for future generations. So that was definitely in the films, and it's clearly your philosophy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what we're doing here right now, Lauren. We're having a wonderful conversation, and folks like, Pat Leary, who just put a note in the Q&A, that we're all getting something from it. It's an exchange. It's informative for all of us.
Well, this
It's
went
fun.
by this went by so quickly, but I
Yeah.
think we'll thank you, Deborah, for such a great conversation, and thank all of you who sent questions in and just watched the film with us and participated in this GlobeDocs showing of On Board, and this wonderful conversation with Deborah Riley Draper. So I thank you so much,
Thank you.
and I wish you best of luck in the future projects. Maybe we'll see you again.
I hope so. Thank
I
you so
hope.
much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much.
Bye.